Should Christians celebrate Kwanzaa? Addendum. Yeah, what's going on, party people? The place to be. I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city, Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody had a good Sunday. They got edified by the word of God, had some good and robust fellowship with the saints. And and I hope everybody had a very, very Merry Christmas. I know for many of us, it's difficult. For many of us, it's the first Christmas season without certain loved ones. I definitely know how that feels. And my heart goes out to you guys that's experiencing that for the first time. Or you're just going through stuff. I also can relate, unfortunately. This hasn't been the greatest of Christmas holiday season for yours truly. But we're moving onward, and I pray that great things could happen for you and yours in the coming year. Pray for me. It's going to be a very challenging new year for me. Um, going to be stepping out on faith on a lot of things, and I just pray that God holds my hand, He clears a path, and He makes it very clear how He wants me to move. And I pray that God does likewise for you and yours. Um, but right after Christmas, we have this somewhat popular time within the Black community, which is Kwanzaa. You know, and I'm actually, you know what? I'm going ahead of myself. I'm definitely going ahead of myself. So if you haven't yet done so, please, please, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend or tell a friend that it's him again. We're only a few days away from the new year, and I think I'm less than 100 subs away from 5K subs. So if you haven't, check to make sure that you have subscribed for yourself. And please just, if you could just inspire one person to subscribe. You know what I mean? Like just one good friend, family member. If everybody could just ask one person to subscribe, that would be amazing. And if you like how it goes down with BK and you like the stuff that he puts out, you can show your appreciation via PayPal, which the link should be pinned on top of the chat. Or if you'd like to be a monthly supporter of BK, you can become a Patreon, where you get assortment of goodies to enhance your personal Bible study. All right, so yeah. So yes, this time of year we talk about, or many of us, not all, but many of us, we engage in this fairly recent holiday within the Black community called Kwanzaa. And I've done a video on this, I think last year or the year before that, about should Christians celebrate Kwanzaa. And I decided, there's some added information that I found that I want to incorporate just to have a more robust answer to this question. Okay. So with that being said, let's talk about the creator of the holiday. It's not often that you actually get to pinpoint the actual person who creates a holiday. So we have Mulana Karenga, PhD, is a professor of Black Studies at California State University, Long Beach. He is the author of the most widely used introductory text in the field, Introduction to Black Studies, and has authored the seminal study, Ma'at, the Moral Idea in Ancient Egypt, a study in classical African ethics. He served as chair of the Department of Black Studies at CSULB for 13 years. He has been called, quote, the preeminent cultural philosopher in contemporary African American scholarship, having developed KWANZAA, a philosophy of social and cultural change, and having created the Pan African holiday of Kwanzaa and the Nguzo Saba, the seven principles. He has written the authoritative text on Kwanzaa, a celebration of family, community, and culture, as well as numerous other books and articles in Black studies and social and cultural change. And this is from the Handbook of Black Studies. Um, and these are the principles that he has incorporated within this Pan African holiday, and they are unity, self determination, collective work, group economics, purpose, creativity, and faith. These things on themselves are, yes, good things, very positive things. It's things that any Christian can subscribe to, and amen. Right? There's scripture that goes according to all these principles. Right? The idea of being working as a collective and having purpose and creativity. You know, us being made from a creator. Of course, we also have the ability to create and be creative. Right? Faith. All these things, you know, in on itself are positive, and we all should, you know, grow and mature in these things, right? But you know, we're gonna look at his book, which is Kwanzaa: Celebration of Family, Community, and Culture. Uh, this particular version was 1997. I don't know when the original book was published, but nevertheless, this is his book, and this is his take on the Pan African holiday that he created. It says here, moreover, this time period was chosen to establish Kwanzaa because the date, 26 December through the 1st of January, marked the end of the high price hustle and bustle of Christmas buying and selling. This allowed for avoidance of the crass commercialism usually associated with this period, and for savings on any modest gifts one might want to purchase in the context of Kwanzaa gift giving guidelines. Finally, the time of Kwanzaa celebration was chosen to give those who wish it a culturally specific holiday to celebrate in a time of celebration. In a word, it was to give African Americans an opportunity to celebrate themselves, their culture, and history, rather than simply imitate the dominant culture. And placing it in the context of the general celebrations of the season offered a definite chance for a proactive choice at a time when one could clearly be made. So what I find interesting here is this idea that, you know, African Americans, right, people of African descent, that he is basically saying that Christmas isn't for the African American. So there was this space, this gap that needed to be filled, and he decided to fill this gap with Kwanzaa. Because for some reason, Christmas, if you participate as a black person, if you participate in Christmas, you're imitating as opposed to participating, right? Because you're not part of the dominant culture. This holiday, according to him, is pretty much has ownership within the dominant culture. But history would beg to differ. Because in the search of the origins of Christian worship, sources and methods for the study of early liturgy by Paul F. Bradshaw, he says Thomas Talley, however, has challenged the dominance attained by this theory and revived the Duxing's hypothesis. He has pointed out that Augustine, in one of his sermons, alluded to the fact that the Donatists in North Africa, unlike the Catholics, had not adopted the celebration of the Feast of Epiphany on January 6th. which seemed to imply that they did celebrate December 25th. This in turn suggested that Christians must already have existed prior to the Christmas, not Chris, Christian, Christmas must already have existed prior to the Donatist schism in 311, and hence at a date when it would have been unlikely that Christians would have wanted any accommodation to less than friendly imperial religious sentiment. On the basis of other evidence supporting the computation hypothesis from Augustine and from an anonymous work known as Del Solotis, which was apparently also of North African provenance, Taylor tentatively suggested possibly that Christians may have first appeared in that region rather than at Rome, as it's usually supposed. So, according to a lot of these historians, the celebration of the incarnation of Christ happened early 4th century and in North Africa. So to say that when African Americans are imitating the dominant culture when they participate in Christmas would be historically inaccurate, because believers, Christians in Africa were already celebrating in those churches prior to their European counterparts. So this is just not true. Okay? So you're not conceding or giving in or imitating some sort of European holiday when you celebrate Christmas. That's just not true. He goes on to say Kwanzaa is not a reaction or substitute for anything. In fact, it offers a clear and self-conscious option, opportunity and chance to make a proactive choice, a self-affirming and positive choice as distinct from a reactive one. So he's saying that Kwanzaa wasn't created as a reaction, right, to Christmas, but it's just a choice, right? Either, which is weird, right, when he says this, because so he's saying is you can either imitate the dominant culture, aka white people, or you can actually do something here that's for you. That's kind of, a little disingenuous, right? It's like, yeah, you can either, partake with your oppressors, or you can have your own thing. Choice is yours. I mean, is it, when it's framed that way, is it really a choice? Right? He's being a little, little slick here. But he's also contradicting himself. What do I mean by that? Well, when you look at Fighting for Us, Mulana Karenga, the Us Organization and Black Cultural Nationalism, page 69, it says this: when Us, which is the name of the organization, established Kwanzaa in 1966, the holiday coexisted with several newly developed practices that fit into the organization's mandate to initiate a cultural revolution of alternatives. At that juncture, the organization's ideas about the holiday and its audience were far more exclusive than what came to be in recent years. Christianity was seen by Us at the time as the handmaiden of a pathological Negro identity, an obstacle to a new reconstructed Black nationalist consciousness. Quote, Christianity is a white religion, Karenga stated. It was a white God, and any Negro who believes in it is a sick Negro. How can you pray to a white man? So this was his stance in 1966. Now, when you go back to his book, which the most recent one I had was 1997, right? It seems as if he's softened his position. Maybe. Because he still believes that Christmas is not for us. Right? He doesn't go as hard as he did that quote in 1966. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't hold that same sentiment. He just doesn't expound on it in this book about Kwanzaa. But he's a little slick with it, though. right? And then he says it's not a reaction or a substitute, right? Well, says here Christmas was thus seen as an extension of a pathos necessitating criticism and, more importantly, the construction of a culturally and psychologically healthy alternative. But wait a minute. He says that Kwanzaa is not a reaction or a substitute for anything. Did he feel that way in the 60s? Right? Karenga remarked at a speech given at Howard University in 1968, quote, if we ask people not to celebrate Christmas, then we must be prepared to give them an alternative. So we did some research and found a Zulu custom, the Zulu Harvest Festival, Umkoti, where people came together and celebrate for about a week around the first of the year. So I don't, there's some confusion here, right? Because early in his book, later on in his book, he says Kwanzaa is not a reaction or a substitute for anything. But when he first instituted this holiday, he says if we ask people not to celebrate Christmas, so that means that's the case. Like they were trying to get rid of Christmas for Black people. Now he doesn't say that in his book on Kwanzaa later on. He's a little bit more slick with it though. He's like, well, it's a choice. We're giving you something, to do rather than imitate the dominant culture. Just a nice, softer way of saying you really shouldn't be going over there anyway. But if you want to, right? So I have yet to see if he has definitely changed his position. He's framed his position a little differently. It's a little bit more palpable, but I haven't read anything where he's changed. So the very inception of Kwanzaa was to take as an alternative, as an exchange from Christmas. He did not want them to participate in Christmas because Christmas was a white Christian holiday, and that African Americans should not play a part in it because by doing so, you're merely imitating the dominant culture. So when he first thought of this, he thought of this as a way of getting rid of Christmas for Black people. Okay. So let's continue. Let's go back to his book on Kwanzaa. Likewise, Kwanzaa is a cultural choice as distinct from a religious one. Right? Remember, he says it's different than religious, right? Okay. This point is important because when the question arises to the relation between Kwanzaa and Christmas, this distinction is not always made. This failure to make this distinction causes confusion, for it appears to suggest that one must give up one's religion to practice one's culture. Whereas this might be true in other cases, it's not so in this case. For here, one can and should make a distinction between one's specific religion and one's general culture in which that religion is practiced. On one hand, Christmas is a religious holiday for Christians, but it's also a cultural holiday for Europeans. See, again, you see how he kind of, distances Black people from Christmas? Like, it's a religious holiday. Yeah, there's a religious component of Christmas, but it's also a cultural holiday for white people. And again, history begs to differ. It was Christians in North Africa were the first ones, early 4th century, to celebrate the incarnation of Christ. Anyway, thus one can accept and revere the religious message and meaning, but reject its European cultural accretions of Santa Claus, reindeer, mistletoe, frantic shopping, alienated gift giving, etc. This point can be made by citing two of the most frequent reasons Christian celebrants of Kwanzaa give for turning to Kwanzaa. Okay. The first reason is that it provides them with cultural grounding and a reaffirmation as African Americans. The other reason is that it gives them a spiritual alternative to the commercialization of Christmas and the resultant move away from its original spiritual values and message. Here it is of value to note that there is a real important difference between spirituality as a general appreciation for and commitment to the transcendent and religion, which suggests formal structures and doctrines. Right. So, and this is a lot, and we hear this every day, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Right. But religion, the very word just means to do again. Right. That there's a pattern. And if you're spiritual every day, guess what you're doing? That is a religious practice. So it's one and the same. We've given the term religion such a negative connotation, we want to stray away from that. So we try to use the whole, well, I'm spiritual. But again, it backfires because if you're spiritual all the time on a regular basis, that's a religious experience, right? If you brush your teeth every day, that's a religious experience. If you go to work every day, that's a religious experience. So it's not this clean break as many people would like to make. So Kwanzaa is not a religious holiday, but a cultural one with an inherent spiritual quality. As with all major African celebrations, this inherent spiritual quality is respect for the transcendent, the sacred, the good, the right. Thus, Africans of all faiths can and do celebrate Kwanzaa, i.e., Muslims, Christians, Black Hebrews, Jews, Buddhists, Baha'i, and Hindus, as well as those who follow the ancient traditions of Ma'at, Yoruba, Ashanti, Dogon, etc. For what Kwanzaa offers is not an alternative to their religion or faith, but a common ground of African culture which they all share and cherish. It is the common ground of culture on which they all meet, find ancient and enduring meaning, and by which they are thus reaffirmed and reinforced. Now remember, he's saying that there's common ground here for Christians. That, it's a common ground via this inherent spiritual quality. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, he's changed his position. He no longer wants to use Kwanzaa to get rid of Christmas. And let's say he's fine with Black people being Christians, right? But what is the inherent spiritual quality of Kwanzaa in which we can find common grounds with as believers in Jesus, right? Well, let's find out. This is Kwanzaa, Black Power and the Making of the African American Holiday Tradition by Keith Mays. And before I continue, see what's up with the people here. Now I know I celebrate Kwanzaa as well, but BK still might do even with our healthy disagreement on this matter, understanding the source material. Oh, love BK. I love you right back. You know what I mean? Love you right back. I just want people to be informed and, so that you can make an educated decision when it comes to these kind of things. You know what I mean? So, and big up to Michelle Turner, Bodega ladies on the check-in. What's going on, Mahogany Promise? But yeah, it is all love. Absolutely. Absolutely. But, as believers, we should really understand what we're, participating in. So Central to Kwanzaa's invention was the manipulation of Swahili and the appropriation of celebratory elements from African harvest festivals. Language manipulation meant both adding and subtracting alphabets, altering definitions of Swahili words, and adding a lexicon of new words and phrases, such as Kwanzaa and Nguzu Saba. Inspired by African harvest celebrations on the entire continent, Karenga appropriated the word Kwanzaa from the Swahili phrase Matunda ya Kwanzaa, with Matunda meaning fruits and Ya Kwanzaa meaning first. Dropping Matunda ya, Karenga capitalizes the K in Kwanzaa, then added another A, giving the holiday its official name in the American context, Kwanzaa. Taking a word meaning first from the original Swahili imbued the new holiday with authenticity and cultural legitimacy. Because the name Kwanzaa was so reliably convincing and saturated with African veracity, many Black Americans did not realize that the name Kwanzaa was only inspirationally African and not African in fact. Due to the growing confusion in Kwanzaa's early years, Karenga was forced to level with Black America, clarifying nowhere in the African continent is there a holiday named Kwanzaa, right? So, but again, he is making up this holiday and is drawing from different sources that we're going to be looking at. But Kwanzaa did exist on the African continent. It was called 1,000 different names tied to the particularities of harvest celebrations in local African communities. These harvest celebrations provided Karenga with the cultural repertoire to construct and invent Kwanzaa. While reading books on the rich traditions of Southern African Zulu culture, Karenga came across one particular harvest festival called Unkosi. Unkosi was one of the first fruit ceremonies practiced in the Natal and Zululand regions of South Africa centuries before and during colonial occupation. The culmination of the harvest in Natal and Zulu regions usually occurred during the end of the year and at the beginning of the next, prompting the people in these areas to stop their daily activities and partake in the annual agricultural celebration. Unkosi, like many first fruit ceremonies, relied on the king or chief to protect the community by sampling the crops first. Usually inculcated from a medicine prepared by the village elders, the king or chief readied himself against potentially evil forces prior to ingestion. Once evil was undetected in the harvest, the food proved ready for consumption by the rest of the village. So already you're starting to see, there's not a lot of common ground here, right? Protecting against these evil forces, and how does one do that? Other features Kananga and us discovered in Umkosi ceremonies were animal sacrifices, mock insults of the king, dance competitions among military regiments, ancestor veneration, feasting, and the ingathering of local people. These elements in Umkosi were both deeply cultural and spiritual. This is the spiritual thing that Korenga was talking about. These components. One author surmised that the name Umkosi is a variant of the word Amakosi, a Zulu term meaning ancestral spirit. Now, this is from L. de Hirsch, the Communicative Power of Blood Sacrifices from the University of Pretoria Repository. Since the ancestors, Ndolsi, I guess Indolosi, are intimately associated with their offspring, ancestors also like to stay at the arch over the entrance. Ancestors have seats in the gallbladder of animals. Ancestors take another human form in dreams. From an academic discussion of Zulu ritual and sacrifice, noting that sacrificed cattle are connected with ancestors, and that cattle play a key role in ancestral communication. So this is what he's drawing from. Okay, he's drawing from this sacrificing to the spiritual realm, to ancestors. The ritual took place at the cattle enclosure where a cow had been selected for the sacrifice. It is believed that the bellowing of the sacrificial animal is crucial since it is believed to open up communication with the ancestors. Thus, in both cases, the offering of the bear or the sacrifice of the animal is considered to be means of establishing communication with the ancestors. Okay, again, this is what he's drawing from when it comes to establishing this Pan-African holiday, Kwanzaa. Okay, Karanga and us were presented with a cornucopia of cultural practices from Umkosi. In designing the new holiday, the challenge became what to select from the many activities performed in Umkosi harvest festivals. Certain village ceremonial activities associated with the harvest in Natal and Zululand areas were incongruent within an urban industrial context. You think? Stripping away components of the Zulu custom unfeasible in an urban society, Karanga and us forewent Umkosi's animal sacrifices and mock insult to the king. Smart move by Karanga. Smart move. So it'd be kind of hard to get people from Detroit and Brooklyn to be like, yeah, we're gonna need you to cut these cows, and we're gonna open this bladder so we could talk to the ancestors. That'd be kind of a hard sell. Nor would Karenga and us expect African Americans to plant seeds for an agricultural harvest. However, calling out the names of ancestors, feasting, dancing, and Mkosi's appearance at the end, beginning of the calendar year, proved critical to the new holiday Kwanzaa. Thus, African Americans would celebrate Kwanzaa, a selective reproduction of Umkosi, not Umkosi itself, or any other holiday or any other harvest holiday, as Kananga explained, quote, Kwanzaa then became for us and Black people a time and week of the gathering in of ourselves rather than the agricultural harvest of our ancestors. So this is how he bounces and flips it, right? But, I don't see the common ground, to be quite honest with you, because we see like in Leviticus 20:27, a man or a woman who is a medium or a necromancer shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Their blood shall be upon them. We have been called not to dwell or invite these other spirits. We are to speak to Christ. That's it, to God. So which is ironic because many people like to throw the Christmas is pagan critique, but as we look through history, we see that that's not really the case. But when it comes to Kwanzaa, there's pagan elements. Now, to be fair, Karenga doesn't incorporate those elements because he kind of knew that Black people weren't going to go for it. But he is literally drawing from agricultural rituals that will be antithetical to a practitioner of the Bible. And again, like I said earlier in this program, the principles themselves, amazing, positive, beautiful. But the origin and the intent of the holiday is where I have an issue with. This man wanted Black people not to participate in the celebration of the incarnation. He did. He wanted to replace it with a holiday that he created, which is inspired by rituals that go against, scripture. And I personally believe, as a believer, one shouldn't participate in Kwanzaa. Because his intent was to get for Christians not to celebrate the birth of Christ, so the incarnation of Christ. He did not want to do that. He tries to smooth it over throughout the years. But when you read his material, clearly he believes that, well, that's for white people. And I'm going to create something for us because we don't have anything for ourselves. I'm like, Christmas is for me too. I too believe in celebrating the incarnation of Christ. In fact, it was people that looked like me that did it first. You know, now I don't know if Mr. Kananga knows that. He might not. And I'm sure he was very sincere and he did it because he loved black people. But you know, as we know, one could be sincere and be wrong. So I'm not saying he's this devil and he's trying to destroy. I don't know the man, and I'm giving the benefit of doubt. I believe that he's doing it for sincerity and for the love of his people. Until proven otherwise. But based on what he said and the reason why he even invented it, I can't agree with him. You know, Christianity is not the white man's religion. You know, I don't pray to a white man. I pray to God. I pray to Jesus. I celebrate Jesus. Now, this is a really good question here. Do you think Kwanzaa could be redeemed? Perhaps. Perhaps. But I would have to hear it from Karenga himself, though. Because he's the one that made this. Because if we change it and, you know, we kind of recontextualize it so it could be more gospel friendly, it's no longer Kwanzaa now. It's something else. Right? But we don't need that because we have Christmas. But if he's open to changing, you know. Oh, my man here. Yes, we do. We do. Respectfully. And you know, this is my guy. This is my guy. Like, love him to death. Like, you know what I mean? But I just, you know, he did say he made this as to get rid of Christmas. He said that. Now, if he's changed his position, and he has every right to change his position because he created the holiday to begin with. He's the guy. He's the primary source of Kwanzaa. Him. You know, and again, the celebration of those principles are dope. I think as Christians, we definitely got to celebrate those principles on a regular basis, 100%. You know, and finding time to be with one another in fellowship, amen to that too. I just take umbrage with the fact that he doesn't want us to celebrate the incarnation. Now, if he's changed his stance, great. Great. You know, so, and again, I have no ill will towards Mr. Karenga until otherwise. I'm going to believe he did this because he loved black people and he's trying to empower black people. You know, so yeah, my man Byron here. But I wouldn't want anyone to celebrate or participate if it goes against their convictions. I will not celebrate with my brother if my brother doesn't feel right. Yeah, I mean that's the Christian spirit, right? That's the way we should be. You know, yeah, I definitely not a fan of Kwanzaa. You know, and 'cause I want people to understand, you know, what this man has done. Now, can you redeem it? Yeah, perhaps. I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no because I don't know everything. I'm going based on the data that I have and how I see it. and I'm more than open to more data. You know, remember, this is the guy who a few, not too long ago believed Christmas was pagan. You know, until I found data that said otherwise. You know, so so the same way that if someone can persuade me to understand how we can redeem Kwanzaa, I'm open to hear the argument. You know, but until then, I'm going based on what data I have and based on what I'm seeing. I just couldn't do it at this point. If Kananga comes, it's like, yo, I found Jesus. I'm sorry. Forget this ancestor stuff, but we're going to keep the principles and here's scriptures that back up this. Then be like, all right, that we could talk. We could talk. But until I see that, because I feel like, I guess for me, and this is just my opinion, if we do it differently than how he said to do it, then we're no longer doing Kwanzaa, technically. This is my opinion. It's my opinion. I'm open to hear a difference in that. But yeah, that's it, guy. I just wanted to share this information with you guys. And, I believe we shouldn't participate personally, but I am open to, data that says otherwise. Okay? So there you have it. And Byron, you know what I mean? Like we rock out like crazy. Like that's my guy. You know what I mean? And Christians can have differences. It's not, I don't think he's going to hell, because of Kwanzaa, But I personally do have some issues with it. And I'm just sharing what those issues are. You know what I mean? So that's it. So with that being said, boys and girls, we're gonna get out of here. So this is BK signing off. Peace.